we hate the off season. In fact, around here, we hate the off season so much, I try to not even refer to it as the off season. I try to call it the part of the season where we don't play games. And there is a lot to talk about in relationship to college football, even when there aren't games being played. But the biggest issue is just the length of time between the season ending and the next season starting. It's the longest off season in sports. You got almost 8 months where you don't really have any games to play. One of the best parts of doing this YouTube channel that I found over the years, and honestly, not just making videos, but honestly watching other people's videos and participating in other people's live streams and all that. One of the benefits of all of that to me is that it has made these quote unquote off seasons go by a lot quicker. And I think that's true, like I said, whether you actually make videos like I do, or if you're just a part of the college football community that enjoys watching the videos and participating in the live streams and the discussions and things like that. To me, it has made the quote-unquote off-seasons go by a lot faster. One of the things that I do here on this channel in the off-season to try to speed that along, help it to pass the time to go by quicker, is I have series of videos that I will do at different points in time during the off-season. And one of the things I always love to look forward to this time of year when it comes to the following season is big non-conference games, particularly the ones that we see early in the year. I'm not necessarily talking about the ones that we see every year, like rivalry weekend where you've got like Florida, Florida State, Clemson, South Carolina. You've got a bunch of them. I'm talking about like a lot of these kickoff classic games that are played early in the season, or even home and home series that are scheduled early in the season. I like to look forward to some of those games. Now, in this video, I'm not going to get into too much detail about any one game in particular. I kind of want to just run through a list that I sat down. I looked at the first 3 or 4 weeks of the college football schedule and wrote down some interesting non-con matchups, sort of games that we don't get to see all that often. And I just want to go over this list of games here. And then I'm curious from you guys, because I am going to go back over the next several weeks. Again, I'm going to make, this is a series I do every offseason. I am going to go back over the next few weeks and do sort of a more detailed video on several of these games. But I want to know which of these games you all would like to hear me talk about or do those videos about. I'll give you some brief thoughts on some of these games now, but when I looked at the list of non-con games, 4 stand out. All 4 of them are rematches from last year. These are not the only big non-con games. That's not what I'm saying. It's just, to me, these 4 stand out for particular reasons, or one reason or another. And like I said, they're all rematches from last year. The first one is LSU and Florida State week 1. This is a Sunday game. Week 1 is of college football season always falls on Labor Day weekend. And so we get, of course, the games on Saturday, but then we usually get one game Sunday night and one game Monday night. This is your Sunday night game, LSU versus Florida State. Of course, they played last year. Last year, they played neutral site New Orleans. This year, they're playing neutral site Orlando. Not going to get into my beef with neutral site things. That's not the point of this video. This game was not appreciated last offseason. And I get it. LSU and Florida State, neither one were projected at this point last year to have good seasons or great seasons. Florida State had been kind of down for several years. LSU had changed coaches. It was Brian Kelly's first year. They had questions at quarterback. You didn't really know what you were going to get from either of those teams. And so even though these are 2 huge marquee names, marquee programs in the world of college football, Florida State and LSU, and we don't get to see them play that often, I really feel like last offseason this game was overlooked. That is not the case this offseason. You can make the argument that this is the biggest non-con game of the season, at least the first month of the season. Both of these teams are going to be ranked in the top 10 of most preseason polls. Where does Uncle Lou have them ranked? I've actually got LSU ranked 3rd, and I've got Florida State ranked 6, 7, 8. I've got Florida State ranked 8th, LSU ranked 3rd. Most every poll is going to have them in the top 10. So this game will not be overlooked this year. Florida State won that game last year, and people didn't know what to make of it. Now, it's easy to look back on it now and appreciate what a good win that was for Florida State, because we have the benefit of seeing what LSU went on to do over the course of the season, which was, of course, beat Alabama, and win the SEC West, which no one had projected them to do last offseason. So we didn't really know what to make of the win. Florida State, honestly, at the time, didn't get a lot of credit for that win. It was more like, wow, I guess LSU's not any good if they lost to Florida State. Well, it turned out both those teams ended up having pretty good years last year. This is going to get a lot of hype and a lot of attention this year, LSU and Florida State, the rematch. Ohio State and Notre Dame, they play in week 3 or 4. They play a little bit later in the month of September. Another rematch from a game we saw last year. This one's a home and home, not a neutral deal. So they played at Ohio State last year, going to play at Notre Dame this year. Ohio State won the game last year 21-10. Again, people came away from that game not really knowing what to make of it, right? Notre Dame had a new head coach, and even though they lost by 11 and Ohio State won the game, the storyline kind of coming out of that game was, wow, maybe Ohio State's not as good as we thought, or maybe Notre Dame's better than we thought. Well, then over the next couple of weeks, Notre Dame lost to teams like Marshall and Stanford. Ohio State was blowing teams out, but they were nobody teams. And anyway, it was just a weird, you really didn't know what to make of it. Now, again, by the end of the year, Notre Dame had turned things around and was playing a lot better football, and that made the Ohio State win look better. And, of course, Ohio State ended up getting into the playoffs, being a pretty good team themselves. But they got a rematch coming up week 3 or 4 this year. Texas and Alabama, one of the best non-conference games of the year last year. Came down to the very end. Quinn Ewers gets hurt in that game, goes down. Texas almost still finds a way to win. Instead, Bryce Young kind of takes him down the field there at the end. He had that sort of memorable play where Texas sent a blitz, perfect play call for Texas, and Bryce Young just sort of ducked up underneath the blitzer, takes off running and picks up a key first down there. It was a huge play in the game. But it was a great game. That one was in Austin, Texas, at Texas. This time, Tuscaloosa. They play in week 2. Should be another good game. Arch Manning. Will we see Arch Manning in that game? I don't know. Quinn Ewers expected to be the starter for Texas, but we'll keep an eye on that situation. And then Texas A&M at Miami. Now, I know what you're thinking. These are 2 terrible teams. Why would I even put them on this list? Last year, both these teams were ranked pretty high entering the season. Turned out to be unrealistic expectations in both cases. Both teams had absolutely abysmal seasons. Texas A&M did manage to find a way to win this game last year in Texas A&M. This year, the game's in Miami. And, man, this sure does feel like a must-win game for both of these teams, considering the seasons and the disappointments that they had last year, right? If you're Texas A&M or Miami and you lose this game, how can you have any optimism or anything going forward for the rest of the season? This feels like a big game for both of these coaching staffs and both of these teams for 2023. But those are the 4 that kind of stand out to me. Again, those are not the only good games. We got a bunch more. Utah at Baylor could be an interesting game. That's a week 2 game. Utah hosts Florida week 1. So, no warm-up, no preseason for Utah. They host Florida week 1 and then travel to Baylor week 2. So they start their season off with 2 non-con Power 5 opponents. Interesting in that the Florida-Utah game at Utah, this is going to be the first time Florida has played a non-conference road game outside the state of Florida against a Power 5 opponent since 1991, 32 years ago. It's been 32 years since Florida played a Power 5 non-conference opponent road game outside the state of Florida. Now, obviously, they've played neutral site games, bowl games, and things like that, but they have not played a true road game against a Power 5 non-con opponent outside the state of Florida since 1991 when they went on the road to Syracuse and lost. So, big deal for Florida here with that game. Ole Miss at Tulane. Tulane, one of the best stories of the year last season. I think they were 2-10 in 2021. Ended up going 11-2 last year and beating Southern Cal in a New Year's 6 game. Ole Miss travels to Tulane in week 2. Oregon at Texas Tech. Oregon's going to get a lot of hype heading into the season. Texas Tech's not going to get any. I've got Texas Tech ranked, what, 20th? Let's see. Tulane is 25. UTSA 24. South Carolina 23. UCLA 22, Texas Tech 21. I've got Texas Tech 21. I think Texas Tech is a sneaky good team. You know what Texas Tech kind of reminds me of, and I have them right next to them? Oregon. It reminds me of Oregon State from last year. No one thought anything about Oregon State heading into the year last year. They ended up being a top 25 team. I think Texas Tech headed for similar results this coming season. Could be an interesting matchup. Oregon on the road against Big 12 opponent Texas Tech. West Virginia at Penn State. West Virginia obviously doesn't want to make a bowl game again in 2023. Their first 2 games of the year are on the road at Penn State in week 1, and then they host Pitt in week 2. West Virginia likely starting 0-2 there. Going to be hard for West Virginia to make a bowl game again in 2023. But now the West Virginia Pitt, that's a rematch from one of the best games of the year last year. Pitt won at the end. But traveling to take on Penn State, I got Penn State in my top 5. In fact, I've got them ranked 1, 2, 3, 4. I've got Penn State ranked 4th right now in my preseason rankings that I did the other day. Yeah, West Virginia at Penn State. What about North Carolina at South Carolina? Drake May comes back to North Carolina. Desperately need to find a way to fix that defense, though. Got to replace some pass catchers, too, North Carolina does. But as long as they got Drake May, I think they're going to have a pretty good offense. South Carolina, on the other hand, they get Spencer Rattler back. Up and down season for Spencer Rattler. Didn't play well the majority of the season. It's just a fact. Now he played well the last 2 weeks when they beat 2 top 10 teams, and Clemson and Tennessee fell short in the bowl game against Notre Dame. They lost some key pieces in the offseason of the transfer portal. Running back Marshawn Lloyd, tight end Jaheim Bell. We'll see. Interesting game, though. Border rivalry game, neutral site game in Charlotte, North Carolina versus South Carolina week 1. What about Colorado? Colorado's going to get a ton of attention. Their games are going to be on TV every single week just because of Deion Sanders. Because let me tell you something, Colorado's not going to be very good record-wise. And that's not an indictment on Deion Sanders. There's no coaching staff on earth that could turn Colorado into a 10-win team or anything like that in year 1. It's just not going to happen. And the schedule's not doing them any favors. Colorado, week 1, on the road, TCU. Week 2, home against Nebraska. Could start 0-2. Would be extremely lucky, in my opinion, to start 1-1. But Colorado with a couple of tough non-con games to start the year. Wisconsin at Washington State in week 2. What's his name? Luke Fickell at Wisconsin. We'll see if he can get them turned around. BYU at Arkansas, a rematch from last year. Arkansas traveled to BYU. BYU coming to Arkansas this year, week 3. Pitt at West Virginia, we talked about that. Illinois at Kansas, 2 surprise teams from last year. Illinois was ranked as high as the top 15 at one point. I think they were even 6-0. Ended up not even winning the Big Ten West, though. Ended up not even winning the Big Ten West, though. Illinois. And then Kansas, of course, Cinderella season, first half of the season. Interesting matchup here, Illinois at Kansas in week 2. Washington at Michigan State. Washington, another team, going to get a lot of hype in the preseason. I've got them borderline top 10-ish. I've got them at number 10, actually. I've got Washington 10, Tennessee 11, Oregon 9, but sort of in that general top 10-ish type area. Should be able to handle a bad Michigan State team with an even worse coaching contract there with Mel Tucker making ridiculous amounts of money for no particular reason at all. Pitt at Cincinnati. Non-con game, but a Power 5 versus Power 5, because you got to remember Cincinnati now a Power 5 team, part of the Big 12. Pitt in the ACC, so this is a non-con Power 5 matchup there. Nebraska, Colorado, talked about that. Week 0, oh my God. Week 0 games are horrible this year. I guess I'm glad they do the week 0. It gives us college football 1 week earlier than normal, but I still think they should give us at least 1 game worth watching in week 0 or just do away with it altogether. I think there's 6 games being played in week 0. There's only 3 games involving Power 5 teams, and here they are. Hawaii at Vandy, no thank you. San Jose State at Southern Cal, no thank you. Navy at Notre Dame, no thank you. So yes, I will watch those week 0 games because they will be the first games of the 2023 season, but nothing to get all that excited about. At least in the last couple of years, we had Power 5 versus Power 5 matchups. We don't even have one of those this year. We had like Nebraska and Northwestern or something like that, which isn't a great game, but at least it's 2 Power 5 teams. No Power 5 versus Power 5 matchups this year in week 0. Just those 3 Power 5 teams that I just mentioned. Anyway, those are some of the non-con games that I am looking forward to watching to kick off the 2023 season in the first month of the season. Let me know in the comments down below which of these games you're most excited about. And over the course of the next few weeks, I'll do a series of more in-depth videos where I talk more about specific games on this list. Anyway, have a good morning.